All right, you guys ready? Well, welcome to the Whitefish Vision 2045 Growth Policy Kickoff Meeting. I just want to point out a couple things before we get started. There's bathrooms around down the hall around the corner. We have some refreshments in there. There's overflow in the back. There'll be an audio and a video feed in the foyer just beyond the doors. So if you guys don't have a place to sit, and there's some other chairs out there, all that stuff will be visible. We are live streaming this live on YouTube right now as well. So just giving you a heads up on that. I just wanted to introduce a couple people. We have 3 people from our planning office here. Our housing coordinator, Luke Sponable, is in the back. Wendy Compton Ring, our senior planner. And then somewhere back there, Nelson Loring, helping people sign in. And then this is Alan Tiefenbach. He's our new city long-range planner. He's going to be giving you guys a presentation tonight. And then we also have a couple members of our planning board, Whitney Beckham and Toby Scott here. Giuseppe on the city council was here. I'm not sure if he's still around, but and I'm, again, Dave Taylor. I'm the planning and building director for the city of Whitefish. And so this will be, I don't know, probably about half hour to 45 minutes of a presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer session afterwards about the process and things like that. So, all right, Alan, you're up.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? This is amazing. We've been trying to really cast the biggest net we could to try to get the word out. So the word got out. This is exciting. I'm really happy about this. So my name is Alan Tiefenbach. I don't know if I'm so new. I've been here almost exactly a year. I'm the newish long-range planner with the city of Whitefish. I want to talk. So I'm putting up the agenda about what we're going to talk about, and this is really going to be a planning 101 or a growth policy 101. This is what this is tonight. We're going to talk about what is a growth policy, why are we updating it, what the statutory requirements are. So what does the state of Montana tell us that we have to do? I'm going to talk a little bit about the existing conditions of the city. I'm going to talk about what the process is going to be moving forward, how you can be involved. Obviously, this is the reason we wanted to get a lot of people here, is because we wanted to make sure everybody knew how they could get involved and what the resources were to be involved in the growth policy, because this is a community plan, meaning that this is supposed to be a plan of the community. I'll talk about the next steps. What are you going to be expecting next? And then we'll have questions, but the questions are going to be related to what we're talking about tonight. The process, what is a growth policy, what do I do to get involved, those kinds of things. So a growth policy, it's an official document, and it's used by Montana cities, towns, and counties as a guide for making decisions about their future. They're often called a long-range plan or a comprehensive plan or a community plan. All those terms are used the same. There's a new Senate Bill 382. You'll hear me refer to that a lot. It's also called the Montana Land Use Planning Act, SB 382. And that's a new law that just passed in May. And it's a 53-page document that says what cities must do in regard to planning. So I'll talk a little bit about that, because there's some things, there are some pretty big, significant departures into what used to happen. The new state law, 382, requires a growth policy for any city of greater than 5,000 people within a county of more than 70,000 people. What it used to be is that any city that wanted to have zoning or subdivisions had to have a growth policy, but it wasn't mandatory. Now it's mandatory for cities that meet those regulations or those requirements. That's 10 cities in the state of Montana have to do it. Okay, so I put this up because the last time our growth policy was updated was in 2007. That's the actual the main document of the growth policy. Now, there's been other corridor plans and area plans and downtown specific plans that have come out since then, but the main growth policy hasn't been updated in 2007. And the reason why is I'm showing you, here's where we were in 2007, to kind of do a little flashback about how long ago that was. George Bush was our president. Obama had just announced that he was going to run for president. The first iPhone came out. And this is interesting, is the world ended because Facebook suddenly became available to the public. The housing bubble, the recession had started. The bank bailout, for those who remember that. Nancy Pelosi was elected as the first female Speaker of the House, and Al Gore won the Nobel Peace Prize. So that is where we were when the growth policy that we have now was written, and there wasn't even social media then, which I find pretty interesting. So the Montana state statute has some very specific requirements on what a growth policy has to be. And I've listed them out here. There's certain elements that you have to address. There's more detail than what I'm giving you, but I'm just kind of giving you the general synopsis because I want everybody to stay awake. In general, we have to have existing conditions and a population projection. So what we have to do is based on some analysis, and they give you very strict parameters what that is. We have to say in 20 years what we project the population to be, and that's what the entire growth policy is set around, is planning for that population. So it says that we have to have existing conditions of housing, local services and facilities, economic development, natural resources, and again, this population projection. It's very specific about housing. It says that we are to determine how much housing is available for our projected population, and then we're supposed to show how that housing can be accommodated, or if that housing can't be accommodated, we have to say why it can't be accommodated, and we have to show how every 5 years, how we're progressing towards that goal. And again, this is a requirement that the state is telling us that we have to do. We're also required to provide an element about local facilities and services. So that's like your infrastructure, your transportation, your emergency services. We have to, in this growth policy, address how are all those services going to be able to serve that projected population in 20 years. There's an economic development economic development element that's required, and in general, what we have to do is we have to look at the job sector, the employment sector, institutional enterprises, job composition, and we have to look at what's the labor force, what are the jobs that would be anticipated and the kind of employment over 20 years, and then we have to show how we're accommodating or why we can't accommodate that, why we either don't have the land, don't have the zoning, don't have the services. So again, this charter that we were given is you need to make a population projection based on here's what you can use, and then you have to show how your city is going to accommodate that population. Basically, we call it a build-out analysis. And once that build-out analysis is done, then you have to come up with what's called a land use map, which I'll go through in a minute, and that land use map will show how that land is used. And finally, there's a section on natural resources, environment, and hazards. And that would be things, as you would suspect, like wildfire, groundwater, wetlands, any of those kinds of things, as well as any significant geologic features. We have to identify and map where those features are, and those are some of the things that have to be taken into account when we do this growth policy. So this is super important. Once we do all this information that I've talking about, what this all culminates in is the future land use map. There is one behind the doors that are sliding open and closed. We can show you later. It's on the same one that this is, but there's an existing future land use map in the city that's hanging up there. And what the Montana law does is it says that the growth policy has to have a future land use map and a written description of all the residential, commercial, mixed-use, industrial, and other categories of land. And this map, like I said, must reflect anticipated and preferred pattern of land uses over the next 20 years. And it says you need to, again, show us how housing for that population is going to be accommodated. I took a little snapshot here of our existing future land use map, and I just put a little bubble here to kind of give you an example of what this means. And here, for instance, I'm pointing to an area on the east side of Wisconsin, north of the railroad tracks, and there's a recommendation there for a neighborhood commercial. And what the land use map does is it gives you what the preferred patterns and uses are. It sort of paints a picture of what the character should be like. So in this instance, it talks about these smaller neighborhood serving uses. They tend to be pedestrian oriented with shorter vehicle trips. So our land use map has those general types of categories of land. Once the land use map is done, we are required now to do the zoning map. Am I going too fast? Because I know I talk fast. If I talk fast, feel free to tell me to slow down because I'm overloading you with information. Once the land use map is done, that general policy map, then there's a zoning map that's done. And the zoning map is regulatory. And what that means is that the zoning map is law. The land use map is the wish list and the preferred pattern based on what the build out analysis is. The zoning is the way that you institute that. So in this particular instance, I'm showing the same piece of property, even though the map looks a little different. And I said that neighborhood commercial was designated in the land use map. Here's an example, that is now being zoned as WB1. and it has all the exact allowed uses that you can do. It has the minimum district size. It says what the setbacks have to be from Wisconsin. It talks about what the maximum allowed height is, and architectural design. So again, land use map is the preferred, kind of the overall general. The zoning is the regulatory way that the growth policy is actually instituted. Does that make sense? All right, let me talk a little bit about the existing conditions of the city, because as you probably expect, there's been quite a bit differences between 2007 and now. So 2007, the city was a little more than 4,000 acres. Today, it's about 8,000 acres. Now, it sounds like a lot, but in 2007, Whitefish Lake was not in the city limits. So most of this growth was that the city limits grew around Whitefish Lake. That's because the city before it didn't have control over what happened in the lake. And that was one of the reasons that that the city wanted to be able to have some say about what happened to Whitefish Lake. The population was 6,500 in 2007. Today, it's just short of 9,000. Flathead County was 88,200. Today, it's about 111,000. I've seen projections for 2045 for it being about 125 to 130,000. This one is really, I think, unsettling. Median home price was $319,000. Today it's $1.3 million. In 2020, the median home price in Whitefish was $447,000. So in 3 years, it went from $447,000 to $1.3 million. The median income, however, only went up in this period about $20,000. So the houses went up 10 times, and the median income went up by $20,000. We not quite doubled our housing units. We had 2,600-ish housing units. Today we have about 5,500. I'll talk a little bit about how we came up with that. The rent was $477 in 2007. Now it's well over $2,000. I don't have an exact number because it was difficult trying to get anything that matched, but all of the numbers were over $2,000. I've seen as high as $3,200 for a one-bedroom apartment. Whitefish Mountain, just about 300,000 visits in 2007 and 463,800, so almost 464,000 now. And Glacier National Park visits went up by about 1 million a year. So it was 2 million, and now it's not just shy of 3 million. The major employers in 2007, though, I found kind of interesting, is the top 4 major employers. 3 of those are still our major employers. So the mountain, Mount Whitefish Mountain Resort, a big mountain, was the major employer here. North Valley Hospital, now Logan, was the other major employer. And school district dropped down a little bit. And then BNSF, which obviously the railroad, has been a major employer of the city pretty much since the city began. It's kind of why the city began. So here's the major employers today. Went up quite a bit with Winter Sports, which is Big Mountain. Logan Health is now 650. And BNSF is our third. The school district has dropped down a little bit. But again, these are the major employers within the city of Whitefish. Okay, so the Montana Land Use Planning Act, that's what MLUPA is, requires the city to provide existing conditions of housing, local services and facilities, economic development, natural resources, environment, hazards, and land use, and show how that jurisdiction will accommodate that projected population over 20 years. I keep saying that because that's basically the pretext of what this growth policy is. So according to the Montana Census and Economic Development Center, who I talked to earlier this week, we're projected to be around 11,400 people in 2045. I've seen some variations of that. We've had historically about a 2% growth rate. Now 2020, it went up to like 14 to 18%. But in general, our growth rate is somewhere between 1.8 and 2.2% a year. I say that because one of the things that we're allowed to do is we can take the historic growth rate and we can project that forward to come up with our population. The other thing we can do is we can look at like what the population is of Flathead County and come up with our commensurate size. When I came up with a 2% percentage, it came up to be relatively higher than this. I talked to the Census of Economic Development, and they gave me this number based on it's not really a 2% as the growth curve starts to slow down over time based on cost of land, availability of land, cost of services. So it's not really 2%. Goes up, it starts to level off. So this is the lower, more conservative estimate. And when I say 11,500, that's permanent residents. All of you know there's a whole lot more of that on any given time in Whitefish between the people that aren't the full-time residents and the visitor economy. Okay, so staff, and when I say staff, I mean me. drove or walked every street in this city. And I mapped every use in this city at a parcel level. So I drove up there, I said, what is actually built on this piece of property? And then I compared that against Google Maps. So I went into Street View and looked at what I could see there, and I looked at some of the property data that I had from the state of Montana as well as the Flathead County assessors. And I mapped all this into something called a geographic information system to be as accurate as I can. The reason why is to move forward on this growth policy, I really wanted us to have a good snapshot of what does Whitefish look like right now. The other thing I did is we have different planning areas in the city as well. We have the Highway 93 West Corridor Plan, the Wisconsin Plan, the Downtown Master Plan, and the Highway 93 Plan. We had those in paper copies all over the place, but we didn't actually have them mapped into our electronic GIS. Again, geographic information systems. We didn't have that, so I mapped those in. And this is just giving you a quick little overview of these are what the existing uses are from these corridor plans. But I think the thing is more interested is based on all that information that took about 3 months, I was able to compile this map here. This map again is behind that door that slid open, so hopefully you can see it later. But what this map shows is it shows all of the different kinds of existing uses as they are built and developed in the city right now. So if there's a house there, then I coded it as single family residential. And I coded different types of commercial. Some of it was like strip mall type commercial. Some of it was larger scale commercial like the Safeway. Some of it was your casino type commercial. But again, I don't expect you to be able to see this map. What I'm just trying to show you is we have a snapshot that is more accurate than anything else. I can't say it's perfect because I did it. But it's more accurate than anything else you're going to find anywhere as of January of 2023. Problem is now things are being torn down, things are being rebuilt, and the further we get away from that point, the less accurate it is. But this is still a very accurate map. So based on that map, I was able to come up with some interesting analysis. First of all, what I did is I subtracted the lake, all the parks, the right-of-ways, the open space, and the public land out of this equation. Estimate, okay, don't count it down to points, but about 3,050 acres of land in the city is developable, meaning that it is not right-of-way lakes, parks. That's about 38% of the land within the city limits, which again sounds small, but remember the lake is involved, which is twice the size of, or is the size of the city itself. We have about 1,850 acres of property that has a single-family residence built on it. So the lot sizes could be any number of lot sizes, but about 1,850. And of the developable land in the city of Whitefish, 60% of it is single-family residential. Multifamily is on 271 acres, which is roughly 9% of the area of the developable land. Now I'm going to come back to that because it's not apples and oranges, because the single family is much less dense and multifamily is much more dense. So even though there's a whole lot less area, I found the number is actually pretty surprising. Commercial is about 10% of our developable land. And then last thing we did is I looked at it. I had to kind of guesstimate on this, but what I basically did was look at land that was developable, not owned by the public. That was privately owned land that was vacant or large enough that it would meet zoning and allow some kind of building on it, even if maybe that it wasn't at that time. So it could be reasonably developed. Even if you didn't want to sell, right? I'm just looking at how much vacant land we have. We came up with about 23% of the land in the city is developable, but to make things fair, there's a very large property. There's a property owner that owns some very large property up by Big Mountain on Lookout Mountain. So I subtracted that out because it just really skewed things, which still took us to about 19 or 20%. Again, it's not exact, but it's kind of giving you a snapshot of where we are right now. All of this stuff, by the way, and I'll talk about the website shortly, all these maps are available on the website. I loaded them up this afternoon. So if you want to look at them closer, and again, I'm only as good as the data that I can come up with. So if you look at this existing conditions map and you think that something's not right, tell me and I'll change it. If it's not right, I want it to be correct. I've done the best that I can, but I'm not perfect. Okay, so housing, I found this interesting. So the state of Montana has point data for every address in the city of Whitefish. It's in this, again, geographic information system. It's not perfect either. I had to kind of go through and see if it made sense. But in general, what I came up with is from looking at the existing conditions map of what types of land uses were there, I looked at the addresses and I was able to come up with our estimated number of units. We have about 3,350 single-family detached, about 2,068 multifamily units, and give or take, actually I'm going to lower this, it looks like about 110 mixed-use units. When I say mixed use, I mean in our downtown here where you have the residential above the commercial. Now, in the census in 2020 shows that we have about 4,650. The reason why I'm doing this, there's a teacher in here somewhere, is I was checking my math, right? They always tell you check your math. I wanted to see if this really made sense. So I looked at what the census said we were supposed to have according to the census. And then every year we put out a report of how many units have been built. And I added those number of units, and I came up with a number of roughly 5,200. So somewhere between 5,200 and 5,500, but that is less than a 5% error. And if you're talking about statistics, that's pretty darn close. So I'm confident that we're somewhere between 5,300 and 5,500 units. What that means is that, and this is where it seems a little more interesting, is 60% of our housing units are single-family residential. 40% of our units are multifamily. Now, as all of you know, or most of you know, many of those multifamily units aren't being rented by long-term residents, which is a whole nother story. But is in regard to the mix of housing, it's a pretty impressive mix. 60% single family, 40% multifamily. Again, the affordability is a whole other thing. We hear the term community character thrown around a lot. But people can't always describe what does that mean. And there really isn't even a very detailed description in our existing growth policy. Here's what our existing growth policy says is community character. It talks about there's two important factors. It is the type and amount of new growth and the rapid rate. And he talks about our growth policy. He talks about that the Whitefish's character is defined by its diversity of residential types. And one of the factors that can threaten the community character is development that's out of scale with surrounding neighborhood. That's about as much discussion about what community character is in our growth policy. When in doubt, when you're a planner, you go to the American Planning Association and you look in their dictionary. The APA has numerous definitions, but this one says the image of a community or area as defined by such factors as its built environment, natural features, and open space elements, type of housing, architectural style, infrastructure, and the type and quality of public facilities and services. So Senate Bill 382, which is, again, that new legislation, it does give us a little bit of latitude in compatibility. It's not super clear, but what it does say is that the land use plan can create compatibility in the land use plans and future land use plans. And it also says that the zoning regulations can regulate the character, form, and mass of structures. That was important because one of the things I hear all the time is about preserve the character of Whitefish, small town feel. We love the way the buildings look. So we had to make sure, I had to make sure that we have some discretion given to us by the state that we can actually look at what community character is and how can that community character be protected. So what is community character? Well, I'm going to show you a few snapshots to give you some examples. And this isn't saying this is what it is, because it's many things. But here's some examples. On the left, what you're seeing is a density map for the city. This is a heat map. So the yellow blobs are where more the density is, the larger the blob. Obviously, the more density, smaller the blob, the less density. And then the purples are dense, but still a little less dense. And then the blue is less. So it's a graduated heat map. But that right there is an example of what the character is in that particular area. On the right is also a density map. This is a little misleading because the older lots and the older houses were built on very small lots, and then the newer houses that are 20 years old are built on much larger lots. But you can look at this map and see kind of how the darker purple is where the density in the city is. Again, I don't expect you to be able to, there's not going to be an exam. This stuff is all posted on the website, so you can peruse it at your will. And again, we can hopefully close these doors later, and everybody can look at the maps that are hanging up here. But overflow right now. Here's another example, and I think he's actually leaning up right against it. This we thought was pretty fascinating. This really tells the story of what's happened over the last 100 years here. So what you see in the orange and the yellow there. In the downtown, that is the structures in Whitefish that are between 50 or older than 100 years old and older than 50 years old. So if you want to talk about historic districts or historic neighborhoods, that's what you see in the yellow. Now, That information is only as good as the information that was given to me by the state, and all of us know there's been teardowns in the last few years. So this is based on data that's probably a few years old, but it's still relatively accurate. The lighter purples and the darker purples show where the newer structures are. So you can look at this and see actually how Whitefish is growing out, what the development pattern is. You can also, if you look closely in and around the downtown, you can start seeing little purple specks where you can see teardowns are starting to happen, and where things are starting to get torn over. And that again comes down to the question, and it's not my question to answer. It's one of the dialogues that'll be involved with this growth policy is what are we trying to preserve and how do we preserve it, right? And I'll give you some more examples here in a second. I know you're not even remotely going to see this, so I probably shouldn't have put this up here, but what this shows, all these little specks are houses that are older than 100 years and houses that are older than 50 years. And I didn't hang that up here, but again, this is just to kind of show you some of the information that we had. Now, based on this, though, we were able to come up with some observations. These are not the only observations or examples of character in the city, but I do want to give you an example when we talk about community character, what that could mean. So what you see here in the purple polygons are the more rural and open areas of the city. It's not the only areas. There could be arguments about where that starts and where it ends. These are just based on what I could see driving around in January when it was snowing, okay? What you see in yellow is really those yellow polygons. Those are neighborhoods that are mostly fairly intact, mostly original structures, mostly consistent architecture. So those are the areas in town that I noticed many of the buildings are still there. Many of the original architecture is still there. These are areas of town that if there was historic areas, that's what these would be. The red hatched areas are gateways into the city. But when you're coming in from unincorporated Flathead County, or you're coming in south from Highway 93, coming in through like Eureka, when does it seem like you're transitioning into Whitefish, and what does that first appearance of Whitefish look like? These are the gateways. So that's what I see mapped there. And then and then the red, solid red, is where the downtown is. Now we have a downtown plan that actually extends beyond this, but when you actually look at where is the tourism, where are the businesses, where are the mix, where is the density, it's basically within this polygon, plus or minus, right? Again, all of this can be adjusted, but this is purely just an exercise to demonstrate how can GIS, Geographic Information Systems, come up with what the community character is in Whitefish so that we can determine what needs to be protected, what do we care about Whitefish. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so this is the process for the growth policy process, and I'm going to tell you now, what you're seeing now has changed with what was original. Okay, and the reason why is, first of all, we're working against legislation that was constantly changing that just got dropped on us on May and say, thou shalt do this, right? So there's that. So we were trying to figure that out, and there's no paradigm right now of how this is supposed to happen in the state of Montana because this legislation just got dropped on us. Okay, so there's that. Secondly, so the earlier version of this, where you see data collection, analysis, and mapping, there was a few other elements. There was a natural resources phase, there was an environment phase, and then there was a local services and facilities phase, okay? They were all kind of little separate phases. It makes sense, but what happened is as we started talking about what the statutory requirements are, where you have to get all this data, you have to come out with a build-out scenario of the city, and then show how you're going to plan for that build-out, we found out that some of our plans, such as our infrastructure plans, water and sewer, were actually the same age as the growth policy, 2006. So we haven't updated some of our technical engineering plans since then. There's a lot more information that needs to be there's an economic development requirement, and we don't have that information. And finally, some of the maps that we have for like floodplains, water table, fire hazard, we don't know yet how accurate those maps are. We have to circle back and talk to the state and some of these other people. What the point that I'm saying is that those elements that used to be there, we're kind of squishing those all together in this data collection and mapping part. And that's going to be where Public Works will be updating their infrastructure plans, where we'll be working on trying to figure out what our environmental stuff is, and we'll be getting all this data and putting it together so that we can put it into the geographic information systems. And with that data, then we can start building the land use map. Does that make sense? I know it's complicated. So the kickoff, this is where we're at right now. And the point of this kickoff was to tell as many people as possible about what we're doing, and as I'm about to show you, how you can be involved, what you can do to stay engaged, what this is, how it works, why we're doing it. The next phase in this process is going to be the visioning phase. And that is anticipated to be sometime in late fall. We're still working out the dates. But that is going to be where you get the community together and you say, okay, let's talk about housing first. What do we envision? What are the issues with housing? What do we picture the housing should look like in 20 years? What do we like about Whitefish's housing? What do we not like about Whitefish's housing? And based on all that information, then we can start looking at what the values of the community is in regard to housing, in regard to transportation, in regard to community character, in regard to our natural environment. All of these visioning sessions are going to be multiple workshops. So people that want to show up, that have concerns about fire, that have concerns about flood, will be able to talk about all these things and come up with what are the concerns, what do we like, what do we don't like, what are we going to fix, what needs to be enhanced. Make sense? That's going to be happening in late fall. Again, I don't have a date set up yet, but it will be coming soon as we get it nailed down. Existing conditions is kind of ongoing right now. I've been doing that. I've walked the city, as you saw, so I'm getting all the information. And then we're going to start crunching all this data, having consultants start working on the maps and the technical things that are way over my education level. And when we have all that data, we're thinking this process is going to take somewhere between 9 months and a year-ish. When we have that data, we'll be able to start posting that data to you as we're going along. You can be weighing in on it, what your focus is on it. When we have data that we all agree is accurate, we may or may not like it. When we have data that is accurate, that is the data that we'll be using to build our future land use map, which will eventually end up to be our zoning, and that will help set the blueprint for the city for the next 20 years. Then we're going to have the check-in. Right? I put the check-in because originally, the original plan was we were going to do land use and housing first. And the reason why is that is typically the topic that brings in the most dialogue, right? Everybody's got something to say about housing. Everybody's got something to say about the way things are growing, good or bad, right? We anticipated that was going to be like a 2-year process, and we were going to be trying to noodle through that as we were working with Public Works and all these different people doing this. But we realized that so much importance has been put now on the existing conditions data and the build-out analysis that we really didn't think it would be prudent to try to start looking at what areas should grow, where the land use should happen, where the density should happen, until we know where it can. We have to know what can accommodate it. Where is the water? Where is the sewer? Where is the floodplains? Where is the high groundwater? We can't come up with the land use map until we know that. So instead, land use and housing is getting pushed towards the second half of the plan. Even though it's one little square, this is going to take a while. In the middle, I put in this check-in. The reason why I did that is because if all this data analysis and the collection is going on, I want to make sure that right before we start land use, that we again reach out to the community, that we have another big meeting of just how are we doing? How have you liked the way things are going so far? Are you getting the information? Because once we start on land use, that's going to be where things are going to really, a big dialogue is going to start. So it's kind of like the second time to kind of re-engage everybody to make sure that any concerns are worked out before we get started on the land use and the housing. After that, then we're required to come up with outlines for how we're going to implement fixing. We're supposed to look at our zoning and see if our zoning matches the growth policy and whether it needs to be updated. And we have to come up with what our outline is to implement it. So we have to actually give timelines about how we're going to implement our growth policy and how we're going to implement our zoning regulations. And then the final thing will be where the drafts of this growth policy will be going out. Now, if you're involved, and I'll tell you how to do that, none of this is going to be a surprise to you. We will have long be talking about this stuff. You'll be familiar with the maps. You'll know the plan text. You'll know all the stuff we're working on. Now all that stuff will be sealed up into the packet, and we'll start getting like the publishing to make it look pretty and all that stuff. And that's when you'll start seeing the final draft of the plan circulating around for however long it takes until we think that it's been cooked and it's ready to serve. And when we're at that point, then we'll start having public meetings. We'll start seeing the planning board and the city council. Now, let me talk a little bit about that. So the first stage in the process is the public. We're coming to you and we're saying, this is what this is what we're doing, here's the way to be involved, here's the steps. That's what I'm doing today. After the Montana state statute says that the planning board is actually the entity that prepares a growth policy. So the city council, your elected officials, appoint members of the planning board. And the planning board technically set the vision, they set the policy, they say, staff, this is the way we want to go. Staff, we don't like what's happening. We prepare that and we bring that to the planning board. So under state statute, technically the planning board could do the growth policy by themselves, but that's what staff is here to do. So we prepare it for the planning board. There'll be many workshops, there'll be work sessions. We've set aside, the planning board meets on the third Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. and they already know that there's a placeholder at 5 p.m. whenever it's necessary for there to be work sessions about the growth policy if needed. And there could be many different multiple public meetings. And if you sign up, you give your name, you say you're involved, you will get notification about this. You will get newsletters about the progress. All these things are going to happen. And I'll focus you back to that. The city council, your elected officials, are ultimately the decision makers of this growth policy. So we can prepare this, we can go through all the work for 2 or 3 years. The planning board can go through all their work and they can package this up and hand this to the city council. And ultimately, they're the ones that decide, are we going to adopt this? Are we going to send it back to the drawing board? However, things are a little different today because we have to have this done by a certain date. The Montana says that from 3 years from this last May, you have to be in compliance with MLUPA. So we have 3 years to do this. Now, I don't know what that means if it's 3 years and 5 days. I'm not sure what's going to happen, if the gates are going to open and somebody's going to take me away or what, but that's what we have. We have 3 years to do this. Okay, so this is important, and so I want to make sure that you guys all understand this because this is a pretty big deal. Under the new Montana law, we are to emphasize that the time for public participation and comment is during the process of the growth policy, which is what we're starting, and the adoption of the regulations, right? So Montana state statute is saying this is when the public participation part happens. We don't get a say on this. We recently adopted a public engagement plan. On the website that I'll show you shortly, this public engagement plan talks about all the different ways that public will be engaged, all the different ways that it'll happen, the different kinds of meetings. It sort of talks about the different phases and how the public can be involved. So you'll know. Again, this is accessible from the website. Once the growth policy or the regulations are adopted, and this is important, and I'm going to do another slide to make sure you understand this, review of site-specific developments is to occur at the city staff level. What does that mean? I'm going to say this again. The Montana state statute said in May that there aren't going to be public meetings anymore for site-specific developments. So going to planning commission meetings about an apartment complex or going to a planning commission meeting about some other site-specific development, the Montana state statute says you don't get to do that anymore. What you have to do is you have to get the public involved with a growth policy. You have to then write your zoning regulations and your subdivision regulations with the public. And when all these are done, if somebody comes in to build and that meets what the zoning and the growth policy is, you have to look at that and either approve it or deny it at a staff level. There is no public meeting. That's very different. Now, there is some appeals processes that are very narrow. It doesn't just say you can appeal it because you don't like it, right? It basically says that if there was an error in judgment, if the planning administrator made an error in something, that could be appealed, and you can only appeal the thing that error, you can't appeal that you don't like, for instance, the apartments. You can appeal something that you believe that error was made in. The applicants can also appeal. So if the zoning administrator, they call it planning administrator, Dave, if he denies something, if the applicant thinks that he made an error in that, he disagrees, he can appeal that. And that can be appealed to the planning board, to the city council, and to the court system. But the bottom line to tell you is that the public hearings on specific projects in the state of Montana has been taken away from us. They said no more. So that's what the bottom line is here. The why is not a political debate that I'm going to get into. We'll say that. Now, what happens is when the planning administrator looks at these site-specific cases, the only time the public is notified is if it is determined that there are new or significant impacts that were not considered at the time of the growth policy and the zoning administrator or at the zoning code. I don't know what that means, right? They also talk about that he has to determine if it's in substantial compliance with the growth policy and the zoning, and they didn't tell us what that is either. We have to figure out what that means. But bottom line is if the zoning administrator, planning administrator, whoever the administrator is, in his opinion, believes that there are impacts that are associated with that project that were not already considered during the growth policy, like looking at what the traffic could be on a particular area or looking at whether or not the sewer can serve a particular area. If he's determined those impacts are increased or weren't addressed, then there is a process where they mail to, it doesn't say how many feet or how many miles. It just says that the public can then be notified during a 15-day comment period, and the public can can offer comments on what they think about these impacts. Again, it doesn't say a public hearing. It just says that if something doesn't match what was done in the growth policy and the zoning, that the public can weigh in on their comments before the zoning administrator makes his decision. I keep telling you this because this is a big deal. What this says is that we have to be involved with the growth policy and the zoning code now, because once that's done, then there's a much more narrow authority on what the public can actually comment on. Don't blame me. Ways to stay involved. So first of all, there's one me and one Dave, right? And 8,000, 9,000 people in the city of Whitefish, including probably 10 or more, 1,000 more people that are going to be interested in this, and a whole lot. So there's only so much the two of us can do, so we're going to be managing this through this public engagement site. It's too hard for me to answer 100 phone calls on any given week about the growth policy or to try to write numerous emails. We actually contracted with a client, and we got this public engagement site and what this does is, first of all, not only is it a place for you to receive information, that's why if you saw Nelson and Luke out there, they were trying, if you weren't already signed up for the site, they were trying to get you to sign up for the site. Even if you're not web savvy, you can subscribe and get emails with the newsletters that we'll be sending you out telling you what's going on with the growth policy. So the engagement site is the best way to stay involved. Now, it's not the only way. I've got my business card out there, right? But again, there's just one me and a few of us staff working on this. There's only so much we can do. It's really helpful to try to have everybody engaged on the site. Also, which I'll show you in a minute, there's a lot of ways that the public will be able to participate on this site. That's what it's built to do, and I'll go through that in a minute. So monitor this site. There'll be progress letters, like I showed you, that'll be sent out to anybody that subscribes to the site. Not all the time, but whenever something happens, when something's added, when something's new, I'll tell you. There'll be growth policy work sessions, like I talked about. They will occur when needed, so it won't be every month, but when they occur, they'll be at 5 p.m. on the third Thursday of the month. They'll be on the agenda. They'll be posted. There'll be a newsletter that'll go out. It'll be posted on the site. That is the time that there'll be a discussion about whatever that is, that the public can come in and they can offer their feedback. There will be upcoming meetings and visioning sessions. There will be numerous visioning sessions on numerous topics: fire, environment, traffic, housing. Those kinds of visioning sessions will be coming. That's the time for the whole community dialogue to pore over maps and to draw circles and to talk about what you like or what you don't like and what you need to fix and what you don't need to fix. There will be drafts of plan sections, studies, and all those things being posted on the site, where you'll be able to download it, where you'll be able to comment on it. There'll be comment blocks. There'll be ways to share it on Facebook, share it all over the place, so you'll have the opportunity to have anybody weigh in on this you can. We will make ourselves available if you have civic organizations, HOAs, or something like that, that wants some other kind of presentation about what we're doing. We're happy to do that. It comes down to a period of how much can one person or two people do. One thing I think is super exciting I wanted to actually mention specifically is one of the things we wanted to try to do in this process is to reach out to people and get people involved that normally aren't involved in this kind of process. And there was some discussion about how can we get our kids involved. And we reached out to Whitefish High School, and one of the social science / political science teachers, I'm not too scared if he want to raise his hand or not. He's in here somewhere, Mr. Webb. There he is. There's Mr. Webb. So he's the political science, social science teacher. He's going to have a class project of this growth policy. And his students are going to write a paper on this, and they're going to give us some of their ideas, and I'm hoping that this will get his class involved in planning and start talking to their friends about what they're doing. And not promising on this one, but I think it would be great if some of the best, I don't want to say winners, but some of the best ideas can be presented to the planning board or the council. Again, I can't promise because that's not my call, but that's what I hope. Is that they could do some kind of PowerPoint presentation and talk about, and very well, you know what? There's a lot of things that kids think about that I don't think about. And if some of these ideas could be really good, and they could make it into the growth policy. So we just think that's kind of like, who can not like that, you know? Definitely kind of a win-win for everybody. Okay, This is the engagement site, www.engagewhitefish.com. And I will even, if you haven't been on there, I'll give you a quick little show of what it looks like. The first thing that you're going to see is you're going to see this website here, okay? This is just the cover page. The reason why this cover page exists is we are hoping that as the city keeps utilizing the site, other departments, other projects can have their own project page. And those project pages will all be posted little cards up here. So maybe there'll be one about current planning, or maybe there'll be one about parks. I'm not pinning it down parks, but there'll be some little project cards. Right now, the only thing that's up is the growth policy. And that's what you have here. And this is the Vision Whitefish Growth Policy website. This is going to be the go-to resource to talk about this, okay? So on the top right here, you see the Stay Informed. This is where you can subscribe. And you can determine how much you want to subscribe. You can just have email notifications sent to you, or you can actually put in a full account and actually participate on the site. And I'll show you in a second how that works. There's different tools for engagement with the public that are available. Now, as we move forward, you're going to see more and more of these tools develop. We don't want to have a bunch of just empty tools sitting there right now. What we have right now is we have the news feed, which is the tab that you see here. And I'll talk about that in a second. The kickoff meeting, which you see today, there was some discussion about a logo, which I'll talk about. So that's any new news you're going to see here. There's a questions tab right now, and this questions tab is where you can post any questions that you want, and as long as you're being nice and I can post it publicly, then I will answer it and I will post it on here, and people can read what kind of questions are here. Now, there's another tool you don't see here yet. There's a couple of other ones. There's one that's a forum board. Everybody knows what those are. So we could, as we get moving forward, we could put up forums on land use. And there can be discussions, public discussions of everybody about land use, where all your comments stay on that site. And then there could be a tab on transportation, where you can talk about transportation. Everybody can do that, and we'll be seeing that as well. There's also a tab that has ideas. So you can submit ideas that you have about what to do about housing, and those will be posted on the site. Again, those tools aren't made available yet. However, the one that we just opened up, which most of you don't know, is now we have a survey that we're looking at, which is kind of post-growth policy. And this is kind of like, it's some multiple choice about what do you like about Whitefish, what do you don't like about Whitefish, what are the things you're most interested in, and then there's some additional stuff like tell us what we missed that you value about Whitefish. Tell us what we missed that you think are the challenges. Enter this in here and you'll actually be able to see the results of this in real time. I have it set up so you can look at the surveys and kind of see who cares about what areas are the ones of the most interest. This is available right now. Somebody is monitoring this website because I put this up at 4:30 last night and I had 18 responses this morning. I didn't even tell anybody we had done it yet. So there's another tool that's going to become available as we're moving forward, and it's a map widget, basically. And what it'll be is it'll be a map, like a Google map or something, and you'll be able to put pins on that map. And we'll say, for instance, where you think are the places in Whitefish that have the most community character. And you can put a little pin on there and say, this is where I think it is, and this is why. Or we can say, where do you think are the areas that are the most dangerous places for our kids to cross when they're coming back and forth from the high school? And you can put a little pin on that corner and say, here's the issue. So that will also be available. It's just, again, not there yet. As we move forward, these tools will start developing. Over on the right-hand side, here's key dates. So the growth policy is here, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. I've got the frequently answered questions. So if you want to talk, if I talk too fast, I gave you too much information, you want more info, all the stuff about what we're doing is here. The important links. So right now I have a link to the YouTube channel, because all this stuff is being streamed and it's also being recorded, so you can watch whatever is up. There is going to be the City of Whitefish's, all of our existing long range and corridor plans are in there. And I also linked the existing 2007 growth policy. If you want to read it, have fun. It's like 100, 200 and something pages. Then we also have a document section. All the documents that you're getting is going to be posted in here. Now, in addition to that, if there's like a draft, I'm not going to bury stuff in there so you can't see it. If we have a draft of a text that we think you're going to need to see, we will put it on the news feed and we will say, here is a draft, click here, you can comment on it. But in here, right now what we have is we're going to have all the materials from this kickoff meeting. We right now have the public engagement plan that's in here. All of this, the staff reports moving towards this point are posted. And these are mostly existing conditions, what the process is going to be. So there's been there's already been some work sessions with the planning board and the council. You can read all the staff reports in there. Any presentations that you're seeing is there, and then public comment. When I get public comment, I put it in the PDF file, and all the public comment is going to be going in there. Not a lot yet, obviously, because we just started the process. I have a feeling that's going to be a job in itself. Down here are thumbnails of the videos. You'll see the video for tonight here posted soon. Probably not tomorrow because I'm taking the day off, but you'll see a thumbnail here soon of a thumbnail of what's here. And then here's the timeline, which has been recently updated. So public outreach and kickoff, it talks about the policy there, talks about the visioning. So if I talk too fast, because I do, you can kind of go through this and get a sense of what is the process. And it'll also tell you what we're in. What phase in the process are we in? That makes sense to everybody? Again, there's a lot of different cities that are using this technology, and it seems to be very successful because people can participate. They can see what other people are saying. Sometimes not always good. They'll say stuff they wouldn't normally say in a meeting. So it lets everybody's voice be heard. Then again, people can be creepy, so we can take stuff down. But in general, it lets people say and do things that they may not do because they're not allowed voice or because they don't like to speak in front of public. We can see all that stuff. Here is the contact information and me and Dave. I really beg you. I'm always happy to come talk to you, to meet with you, do public presentations, but have mercy. I would prefer if there's 100 people with an HOA, have the HOA president come talk to me versus every single person in the HOA. But my door is always open to talk to you. So that's the website. Does that make sense to everybody? We put a lot of research into this, and we think this is the best way to distribute the information and for you to be able to see what everybody is talking about. Obviously, there's Facebook and all that stuff too, but this is the best way for you to know what's going on with the growth policy. All right, let me zoom back. Okay, you still see? Okay, so Engage Whitefish, I just told you there's a survey that's been posted on site. Okay, here's something that you may or may not know about, is we want the growth policy to be a reflection of Whitefish. We want it to be personal. We want it to be something that the community feels like they have some ownership for. What we'd really like is we'd like to see if we can have some kind of logo or some kind of artwork that represents what the title of this is, which is Vision Whitefish 2045. So we're looking for people to submit to us an idea for a logo or for some artwork that we could put on the cover of the growth policy, that maybe we can make some swag. If we'll look at this, we'll give you a $200, sorry, I can't give you more. We'll give you a $250 gift card. We'll memorize you. You'll be in the growth policy. It'll have your name. It'll talk about the logo contest. We'll give you a printed copy of the artwork. There'll be a framed poster of it. So we'll do what we can, but we're really looking. You can email me. My contact information is on there if you have some ideas about what the logo Vision 2045 could be. Love to hear that, so I don't have to do it. Here's when you can. I prefer you have all these ideas to us by October 2nd, and you'll be able to find all my information on the website. Okay, next steps. There's a virtual question and answer meeting that will be held on Wednesday, September 6th at 5 p.m. The reason why is look at the number of people in this room. This is an informational meeting to talk about what we're doing. I wanted to make sure that people that can't be here, either their job hours don't work, they live out of state, whatever, also have an opportunity to be able to talk and discuss with us. So I will make myself available Wednesday the 6th at 5 p.m. and I'll basically open it up for questions. This link has been posted on the Engage Whitefish site. It'll be a Microsoft Teams meeting, so I'll be there. Hopefully some other people on staff will be there, and that'll be a time, we'll give you an hour for you to have any questions that you want to talk about with the growth policy or stuff that you're thinking about, okay? Again, I just want to try to make it so that people in here feel like they can be heard, because there's a large crowd here, and I knew we wouldn't be able to talk to everybody tonight. A survey like I talk about has been posted on the website. I'm encouraging people to participate because that helps me know what's important to people. So I purposely said things like, tell me your 5 things that you most value. Here's a list of 15. What are the 5 that you value the most about Whitefish? And then I gave you an eye at the bottom and said, okay, tell me whatever else I missed. But we want to know, I can go through now and look at what did everybody say is their favorite thing about Whitefish? What did everybody say is their least favorite thing? I can see, what's ranking the highest, what's ranking the lowest. And then, like I said, the visioning sessions are anticipated to begin in late fall. We're correlating that with Mr. Webb's class. So about the time that we start visioning, we're hoping that his class project will be starting so we can try to dovetail all together. We'll see how it works in practicality. Hope I can pull it off. Okay, with that, if there's any comments or questions about what we're doing tonight, what I talked about tonight, this is the time to do it. Thank you. I've been doing this a long time, but if you still don't think this is nerve-wracking, trust me, it is. Okay, let's start with this red sweater.
Two questions. I know this growth policy. The next one, or is there going to be another?
If I understood the question correctly, it was, I know that this growth policy right now is being written for 20 years, but when would the next one be after this? The state statute requires us to update it and look at it either review it and if necessary, update it every 5 years. So by state statute, we're required to do that. Now, that said, if it's not working, trust me, you'll tell me. And then maybe something has to be tweaked. But we're required to look at it every 5 years.
Has there been or will there be a study of the horrible traffic situations that we already ahead and create more?
Yes, ma'am. So without taking this too far down a rabbit hole, because traffic will take you many places, we just had a transportation plan completed. Where's Craig or Karin or one of them? We have a guy from Public Works here. We did have a study just recently done. The question was, for those that are virtually, about what do existing conditions, does it reflect traffic? Traffic is an issue. It's only going to get worse when there's more development, basically. Craig, you want to? He's going to fix it all and it's his fault.
Did you say you're taking the day off tomorrow? Really? Yeah, so welcome everybody. My name is Craig Workman. I'm the Public Works Director. I see lots of familiar faces and happy to see everybody here. We did just recently complete a transportation plan update. I believe the final city council adoption was in October of 2021. And so that looks at not only existing conditions, but similar to the growth plan or the growth policy, projections out to the year 2045. And so if you look at that transportation plan, it's available online. You can get it on the city website. It will mesh directly with this growth policy. It looks at areas that need improvements, areas that require future traffic signals. It has a section on active transportation for bike and pedestrian improvements. It looks at public transportation, and so that has already been done, and that will be meshed directly with this growth policy.
Okay, if I don't call you in order that you raise your hand, I didn't do it on purpose. Brad? I was really hoping that it was going to end with him telling me how awesome I was. If we can back up, go to that part. So you're asking me an answer for what the Montana legislature decided to do, okay? And I'm sorry, the question was, first of all, that I'm awesome. And then secondly, it was, with all this legislation that's coming down, how can the community really know that they're being involved with basically what's happening at Whitefish? The best answer I can tell you is that right now, during this growth policy update and the zoning code, this is when you have to be involved. Because what is eventually going to come out of this, the final result of this is going to be all this data, and there's going to be a land use map that is going to be what drives our regulations and where the development happens and what type of development, where it's going to go, and what the land uses are, how much density. That's what that map is going to be, and that's what that zoning is going to be. And once that's done, then the public no longer comments on the site-specific project. So I don't know if I can give you a great answer on this one, Brad. This is what we were told we were going to do. So we right now have sent out 10,000 postcards. We have included flyers in all of your utility bills. We have put newspapers, articles in all 3 newspapers. We've put press releases. We've announced it to public service announcements, which put on the radio. I've done what I can. And the public will be involved in this process. I would hope that you stay involved on the website, because that will be telling you when we're having this. So it's not going to be like, have a nice day, and then in 3 years we're going to come back with a plan. It's not going to work like that. You'll all have a time to have your comments on whatever these topics are, but it will be structured. And I don't want to just have a free-for-all, right? There'll be a hazards topic where we can all talk with fire, police about what our emergency services are, where are we lacking, how do we fix them, where are the areas that are best served, where are the areas that aren't served. And based on that, then we'll be able to start coming up with a game plan. Did that answer your question as well as I can, Brad? Okay, right behind, and I see you next, right behind Brad.
Yeah, you can contact me directly. I don't know if your question is in regards to the train horn, or we've had a lot of concerns lately about Birch Point being blocked. Okay, yeah, so I don't know that it folds directly into this conversation, but yeah, let's have a conversation about it offline, and I'd be the person to talk to.
There was a hand up right here in the front row. Okay, so there's multi-question answer. Okay, so first question was, you mentioned about once the growth policy and the zoning is done, it's public, the amount of public participation that is allowed per state law is now limited, okay, is the way I'll say. There is still some, not as much, but when if that 5-year review has to happen, what's the process then? The process has to be exactly the same. So the process of the 5-year review, if it needs to be updated, is the same process that you're seeing right now. There is a public engagement. It's required by state law. I have to do a public engagement plan saying how we're going to engage the public. We have to start having meetings and involve the public. And growth policy is basically under a Montana statute. The growth policy is when the growth policy and the regulations are when the public is to be involved. So anytime the growth policy is updated or changed, there will be some kind of public engagement process. Second question. So I'm going to punt this one to Dave, but the question was, we're working with an outdated growth policy. We have outdated regulations. It's going to be several years before the growth policy and the new regulations are done. What in the meantime are you going to do, basically, when you're issuing building permits?
So based on 382, we have 3 years to implement the zoning portion of that. So, we currently have a growth policy. We've also done corridor plans for all the major parts of town, the downtown, Highway 93 South, basically all the areas where most of the development is occurring. And so based on the goals and objectives of those particular plans. I mean, any future development that comes in until this is adopted, we're going to review under the context of what we have. So it's kind of what we have to do based on state law. So we have existing plans. You know, the growth policy hasn't technically been fully updated since 2007, but we have updated it in the sense that we've adopted area plans that have informed us and updated that growth policy for those specific parts of town that are most growing.
Okay, just I'll take you next, and then I'll get to you, sir. The question was, although Senate Bill 382 says that the public has basically been limited to their participation after the growth policy and the zoning is done, and they can't really participate on specific projects, can the city have like a formal meeting with the public to talk about projects and variances? You're not going to like my answer. It's going to be somewhat .kg. I would probably say this is going to be more for an attorney, but I would say probably not. The intent of this was to say that once these are done, if somebody comes in and they develop and it meets all the regulations in the plan, they get to build. I don't know what discretion that we'll have to have informal meetings. I would have to, this is a brand new law and I don't know what the attorneys are going to say. Right now, just from the sense that I've had, I'm inclined to say no. But we don't get to just have additional meetings anyway, but I'm not sure. That's the best answer I can give you. Unless anybody else here, if our attorney is still here, I don't think she is. I know that's not, I'm sorry, that's not is Angie here? You know, Angie, do you have it? Can you answer that or not? I'm sorry. She'll answer everything.
And I don't know how to answer it any more than Alan does. Senate bill is extremely new. It hasn't been tested. You can't hear me? I'll try, thanks. You know, Senate Bill 382 is so new that we haven't really tested it out yet. I think the intent behind it from the hearings I sat through were to allow it to basically the public be involved on the upside, and then the decision be kind of left to staff with the parameters that have been created by the public. I don't see anything in there that allows for additional public input, but I think we're just going to have to see how it plays out. Bozeman has actually come quite far in their growth policy because they were creating it before Senate Bill 382 was passed by the legislature. So I think there's going to be a lot of lessons we can actually learn from Bozeman now that they're ahead of the ball. So
I know that's not the best answer, but it was intentionally done so that when you have a project, you get to build and there's not a lot of public process. Variance, there is no more variance board hearings. They have been outlawed by the state statute. So the planning so under Senate Bill 382, the planning administrator is the one that approves or denies variances. Again, that's not my decision. Okay, I think there was a gentleman here that was raised. Okay, I'm got so many hands up here. I'll start with, keep raising your hands if you haven't raised your hands, and I'll go in order. Okay.
My name is Nancy Schuber. My question is, registration in the engagewhitefish.com and the work groups, is it limited to those residing with a 59937 zip code? Do we want people from Kalispell and Columbia Falls doing surveys and weighing in on what we want in Whitefish?
I'm not going to repeat the question because she said the question in the microphone, but no, we're not limiting to the public participation to only Whitefish. That would go badly even if I tried to do that. There are many, many people that own land, large amounts of land, that don't live in Whitefish. I don't want to get into that dialogue, but that would go badly for me if I did that. Okay, so you guys keep your hands out. I'm gonna go through this room and then I'll go over that just because I'm trying to stay ordered, okay? All right, next behind you. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So what she said is in this new Senate Bill 382, Google it, you can find it. It says that, okay, so back up real quick. One of the things the Montana legislature just did is they said, cities, you have to allow duplexes in any residential zone district that allows single family residence. So that's now law. Any residential designation in any city that's subject to 382 has to allow duplexes in any residential neighborhood that allows single family residence. That's the first thing they did. You shall, okay? In Senate Bill 382, there's like 15 housing strategies. And what it says is that when writing the zoning, a city has to choose at least five of these 14 or whatever, 11, can't remember, I'm sorry. You have to choose 5 of this 12 strategies. That will absolutely be something that we will write in the growth policy and work on with the zoning. So I don't know what those strategies are going to be, but we have to choose 5 of them. Oh, absolutely. That's all. Any of the writing of growth policies and writing of regulations and all that is all stuff that the community is involved in. The only stuff that the public comment has been limited is when everything is done and somebody comes in to get a building permit to build something. That's the part that they've limited what we can do. But all of the planning before that, the public is involved. Okay. I see you in the back. I don't know if there's anybody next to you, but no, yep, that's you. You're raising your hand. You've been patient. I'm sorry. Holy moly. The question was, once we write our growth policy, will the state legislature say we don't like it, fix it? Maybe. They're the state legislatures. Sure. I know in other states, there are requirements that you have to write a comprehensive plan that meets these certain things, and if it doesn't, then the state says they'll write it for you. I haven't heard that here yet. I don't know what happens if you don't do it right or they don't like it. I'm going to hope, because we have a really good city attorney, that we're going to be reviewing this stuff and we're going to get it right and there's not going to be any question about it.
I actually think it's a really, really good question. And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, the legislature can always come back and amend the bill. And we have seen that when they're unhappy with what the city of Whitefish has done in the past, in particular with inclusionary zoning. So I think it's a really good question, and I don't know the answer, but I suppose if we really displease them, they can always come back and amend Senate Bill 382.
I've already seen some discussions about more stuff at the next legislative session, and what she was talking about is we had a law we wrote that I wasn't here yet, but they worked for a while on, that said, I don't know the number, but you build X amount of units and you have to provide Y amount of those units aside for workforce housing deed restricted. Once that was done, the state legislator outlawed it. So they said, nope, you don't get to do that. Was there anybody else in this side room that was raising their question? Okay, so I saw there was 2 in the back that I ignored, and then I see you with the red coat. So there was a couple in the back. Did you have some questions? Okay, red jacket. That's not entirely true. What it says is that variances are approved by the planning administrator. They'll still have to, there's still requirements, there's legal requirements. When you're looking at a variance, like see, Angie's, she's right on me. But basically variances says you have to prove that there's a hardship. Everything that I've ever seen anywhere in planning, I've been doing this for a long time, says that you have to prove with the variance that you have a hardship that was not self-created, that deprives you of reasonable use of your property that other people in like zone districts can basically do. that would still be the criteria of a variance. You couldn't come in and ask to get a variance because I saw a variance some years ago. Somebody wanted a variance for their garage setbacks because they didn't have enough space for their car collection. That's probably not a variance. So Dave or whoever is the Dave doesn't just get to say I like this person. There's gonna be criteria you'll have to look at. There'll probably be some kind of internal staff report that we'll have to write to him with our recommendations, and then ultimately he'd be the poor guy that has to make the final decision. So it'll still be taken seriously, but it's not a public hearing, and it is what it is. There's no public hearing. Not only is there not public, there is you shall not have a public hearing. Okay. Wait. There was a girl in the back. She was raising her hand for a really long time.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess a two-part question. One is the most recently adopted transportation plan available? Yes, it is. In fact, I can find a way to work with Alan to get it uploaded onto the Engage Whitefish website. It is currently on the City of Whitefish website on the Public Works page. It was adopted in October of 2022 by the City Council. So part two, I think, deals specifically with Wisconsin Avenue and the viaduct and city cooperative efforts with the Montana Department of Transportation. And yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it on the head. The city doesn't own or maintain Highway 93, which is Spokane Avenue, East 2nd Street, West 2nd Street, or Baker Avenue or Wisconsin Avenue, at least Baker Avenue north of 2nd Street. And so we do work collaboratively with MDT. We've gone through a number of different processes with the state, not all of them successful, but we do continue to plan to continue that collaboration and work on ways that we can mitigate traffic. One of the things that's shown in the transportation plan is a future viaduct, whether that's someplace between Baker Avenue and East 2nd Street, or just creating a grade separated crossing at East 2nd Street. We fully recognize the fact that the Baker Avenue or Wisconsin Avenue viaduct is not going to serve the growth that we're seeing, and so that is outlined in the transportation plan. Okay.
Okay. I didn't choose you in order. I didn't do it on purpose. I think you have been raising your hand. The question is, when there's a development that's being in the city, is there going to be any kind of acknowledgement on it, or is it just going up? I don't know if we can have a map showing what existing developments are that are being proposed. Maybe there could be a GIS map that shows active projects in the city. I don't know if it says we can't, although they have kind of said that the public doesn't get involved unless it doesn't meet the growth policy or the zoning. I know what this sounds like, but that is what it is. Because they're telling us that we have to be involved at the time of the growth policy and the zoning regulations and the subdivisions. And I don't know if Angie wants to add, or if I've missed something. There is an appeal process.
Yeah, there is an appeal process, and I don't know that Senate Bill 382 calls for that, but I think as a city, just to be transparent, maybe that is something we could work on. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I do think Senate Bill is pretty strict that, it doesn't involve public input, but I think public input is a little different than public notice that it's actually going on. So I think that is something that we could consider. I think that's a really good question.
To follow up on that, it is possible. Again, remember we're figuring this out. Okay, it is possible there could be a map showing active projects, and ultimately the decision maker is Dave. Maybe it's okay for people to say, "Here's some ideas," and he can look at those comments when he's making his decision. But again, I'm treading on some tricky. I'm really nervous about saying that. We're trying to noodle through. We're trying to noodle through this, okay? Rhonda. I think what's the question was. The question was, we've had a growth policy that's been serving us well. This is why Whitefish is what it is, which is a super cool place, which is why I came to work here. The moving forward with the amount of detail, we're going to be looking at a lot more specificity. It could be possibly a large document. I mean, did I capture it? I think what it's going to look like is there's going to be a lot of parts of it that are going to be incorporated by reference. The infrastructure plans, the transportation plans, all of these new plans. Part of what I'm going to be working on is we have all of these plans, and I'm going to be trying to pull them all in or reference them into this new growth policy to pull everything into a house. The existing growth policy does not meet state statute. We would lose because it has to be very specific. It has to be a build-out analysis, and the existing growth policy not only doesn't give population projections, but actually says we are not going to say how much housing or where it should be. We would lose. We would get sued. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. We have done lots of studies. What I am going to try to do is pull everything together, have a growth policy that tells you where everything is, and if there are newer studies, builds on those studies. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't know if that's an acceptable answer. Yes. Yeah, there will be. Yes. I think that the thing that one of the things I don't know about yet is I think one of the things that goes to the benefit is once the growth policy is done, it's a lot harder to change things and to not comply with it too. So, I've worked in other states and other communities where you can do amendments to the growth policy, to the comprehensive plan, and it's plan exceptions they're called, and you can't do that here. So yes, there will be some specificity as much as we can under state law. I know I'm giving you some cagey questions because we're trying to figure this out because it's like 3 months old and no other community has actually even shown us what this looks like yet. Okay, this guy has been raising his hand for a while.
Will this be done? This plan will be created in a Whitefish vacuum, or will be collaboration between California and other cities?
It would be a terrible plan if it was done in a Whitefish vacuum. So what we don't have, I came from Colorado, and there we had councils of governments, which were basically collaborative agencies of all the different municipalities to work together. We don't have that in the Flathead yet. However, we do have a relationship with Columbia Falls. We do have a relationship with Kalispell. We're trying to build a better relationship with Flathead County. So we are cooperating with all these municipalities, but what one municipality does affects the others. Now there is some legislation in the new state statute, and I believe in the existing growth policy that says that when we write our land use maps, or when a county writes a land use map, they have to be generally consistent with what the cities are. So us and the county, or us and another city, can't be totally in conflict with the right next door. But yes, I will be talking to Flathead County. Yes, I will be talking to the Montana Department of Transportation. I'll be talking to Columbia Falls. Yes, we don't plan in a vacuum. That's terrible planning. Yes, ma'am. So the question was about if the public is losing control over individual review of site-specific developments. It seems like you need to have a lot of specificity in the growth policy, like setbacks and height and all that. The growth policies are a policy document. They're not regulatory. However, the zoning regulations that follow the growth policy are, and the public will also be involved in that. So you can have an area that is recommended for commercial with some particular flavor, but there could be 3 or 4 different zone districts that are written under that same area. You know, we have neighborhood commercial, and we have 3 or 4 different zone districts that could fit within neighborhood commercial. But yes, the public will be involved in if we're doing updates, and when doing updates to the zoning, the public will be involved if are we passing new comprehensive zoning updates. So yes, you'll be involved in that.
Currently we have zoning districts throughout the city, and within each zoning district, there's permitted uses and conditional uses, and all of them have setback requirements, lot coverage, building height. Those things would remain, right? The difference would be is that we will have to go through those uses that are considered conditional uses and decide whether they should be allowed at all in that zone, or which zone that they should be allowed in. Some of them, we're not going to be able to say we can't have these in the city because, just by law, there's certain uses that you have to be able to allow somewhere in your city. So you have to decide where those things are going to be. So in general, the zoning will stay the same, but there will be some uses that may have been more controversial in the past that we'll have to decide which zones and which areas that those will go in. And same thing with subdivisions. We set zoning that has a certain minimum lot size, and under this new rule, if someone wants to subdivide and it meets those minimum lot sizes, then there really won't be a public review process. They'll just be able to subdivide that property into those minimum lots based on the existing zoning in place. So in some ways, there's not going to be a lot of things changing, but in other ways, we're going to have to look in great detail about, especially our commercial zoning districts, our multifamily districts. I mean, one of the other things that the legislature did is they said that we have to allow multifamily in all of our commercial zones without limit and only 1 parking space per unit. And so all of our commercial zones in the city, it went into effect immediately. We have to allow multifamily buildings by right. And so there's not going to be much regulation. We do have multifamily building standards that set in certain parameters and, design standards and things like that. They will have to go to architectural review, and there's other things that we'll still be able to do. But in general, most of the stuff that we're really going to be looking at is land use on a, like a broad scale, and then look at it in more detail, and some of that stuff will be broad use categories rather than real specific things. But yeah.
Yeah, I think Dave really simplified it well. Is conditional uses are going away. We either have to allow it or we can't allow it, right? By right. But we can't just disallow everything either, because that's why they're telling us we have to do a build-out analysis and have to look at an economic study that says what these uses are. Okay, I don't know which one of you two, so I'm just going to pick you first. Did you work in City Hall? So the question was in general, by the way, I'm the city planner and I can't afford to live in Whitefish. The question was this basically, I'm going to paraphrase it, but we're residents here. We should have some say over how quickly the town grows. If we're overwhelmed, what say do we have? My answer is going to be the Montana legislature says you got to figure out what your population is going to be in 2025, 2045, and you have to figure out how to do that. Now, we'll be involved. You'll be involved if you want to be. Everybody's going to be involved in this if you want to be. But at the end of the day, we have been told we can't say we're closed, we're full, right? We have to figure out how to accommodate our population. Okay, there was a woman here that was raising her hand. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but that is a question that I am not even going to touch. That is not a dialogue we're going to get into, and not a question I'm going to touch. Wait, this woman was raising her hand over here. So again, if you guys can have that discussion, but that's not what I'm doing tonight, okay? I'm not going to, everybody has a lot of personal feelings. Some are very for this, some are against it. I'm right in the middle just trying to figure out how to make this work. Sitting there. The question was, does everybody have an equal seat at the table? How does that work for the development side? Right? So the law doesn't say this person has more say than that person, okay? This is political, so I'll leave it at that, right? Get involved. I don't make the decisions. I'll be working with you trying to write the growth policy, meeting the state statute, and figuring out how we can meet our population projections. What actually finally gets decided, who benefits, is not my decision. Since I already called on you, I'll give you go ahead and follow up. Yes. Yes. There's going to be no secret developer room. Or at least if there is, nobody invites me, okay? Developers know the process because that's the process they use. That's the best that I can tell you, right? You can decide why this law is what it is. I think you have been raising your hand for a while. If you had, I'm sorry. The comment, I think it was more of a comment, was echoing what the woman said, that if we have limited say over site-specific developments, kind of after the fact, it's not democracy, it's lame. So I'm a citizen and I live here too, okay? And you can decide what you want to decide about Senate Bill 382. If there is a way that we can legally keep the citizens apprised and involved in the process, we're going to work on figuring that out, because I have no incentive at all. I get paid the same regardless of who gets to build or who doesn't get to build. So if we have a way that we can legally make sure that the citizens are apprised of what's happening, and there's a way that without getting into trouble, and I'll be looking to Angie, that you can comment, then we'll do that. Because I don't, more than anybody else, want to see things get built across the street from my house that I didn't even know about. But there is state law, and we have to figure out what it is. So I know I'm giving you some not real good answers, because nobody knows yet. All right, I'll start from the right and just move to the left. So, I'm sorry. I've not been ignoring you. So the question was basically, what's my opinion on the new Senate Bill 385? Who benefits? Who doesn't benefit? I'm not touching that. I'm not answering that here. I'll talk to you over coffee, but I'm not going to answer that. This is being live streamed, and it's very possible that state senators are watching me. Yeah. It sounds like, is that true? Okay, Craig came up behind me and said the city lobbied against this. So I'll talk to you over coffee, but I wouldn't be surprised if our state legislators are watching this right now on the live stream. I'm not answering that.
Which I very much appreciate. You know, that's a very American value as well. Is it's like my land and whatnot. But I'm kind of curious, and I'm sure Greg and Dave can chime in. Where, like, how are we balancing the by right mixed with our infrastructure? Like, so if the transportation plan is like saying something, it's like an X rating. Add 400 more people.
Yeah, so I think the question was, how do we use the transportation plan to evaluate the impact of projects on our current transportation network? Sure. Yeah, so I guess the answer to that is that, the city doesn't, your tax dollars don't go to building new roads and putting new water mains in and putting new sewer mains in, and they go to improving the existing infrastructure. When we need new roads, we need new intersections, we need new traffic signals, we require developers to build those. And so as we're reviewing plans, we look at what the impact is, whether it's the transportation network, the water distribution system, the sewer collection system, and we require the developers to cover the fees and build the infrastructure in order to accommodate that new growth. And so it's difficult to say from any particular development that, okay, that's the one development that required the traffic signal at Highway 93 and Acres or Park Knoll and Highway 93. But in the past, what we've done is we've required what are called cash in lieu fees. So we look at what the impact of that development is on a specific intersection or on a specific water distribution system or sewer collection system, and they pay specific fees towards the amount of growth that they're adding to that. And when we get to the point where we can actually afford the improvement, we use those cash in lieu fees. Or we simply have the developer build that infrastructure if it's part of the project. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I can tell you going forward, we're going to use the same procedure. We're not just simply going to approve projects based on merit or based on whether we think the developer should be able to build there. We're going to look at all of those specific plans, whether it be water, sewer, transportation, and use those plans to inform what the improvements will be required by the developer.
If I can add, there is a little latitude, at least in the housing section, it does say that if it can't be accommodated, then you have to say why, and you have to show how you're working towards that. So there is some, I don't want to say control, but if it ends up we do a study and our infrastructure cannot support something, then that is a defensible thing that we can say, we cannot do this until X has been built, right? Not just 100 people want to move there and you don't have the infrastructure, so they get to do it. If our infrastructure is not in place, then we can say in our growth policy, we cannot grow in this area until X. Yeah, you're talking about concurrency. We have to do a population projection. We have to show how to accommodate that population. But there is some latitude where if the infrastructure, if there's not the actual ability, then we have to look at how the future that could be done. But that could be an area where growth is not funneled to at a particular area. So there is some latitude. It's just not like 100 people are going to show up on your street and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not the way it's going to work. I saw there was a person all the way in the back, so I'm not ignoring anybody that's been raising their hands, but only because I don't know at this point now. All the way in the back, go ahead. I don't know. I asked that question to there's a woman named Kelly Lynch, and she represents the cities. And I said, what happens if we have to do it in 3 years and it's 301 days? And her answer was, you'll probably start having people trying to sue you. I don't know. The development community also knows about this bill. So everybody is watching this to see how this is working. I don't know. It technically says, and I actually had some arguments about this, but it says that the growth policy has to be done in 3 years, okay? It says you have to be in compliance with 382 within 3 years. And one of those requirements says you have to have a timeline for updating zoning. So it doesn't technically say the zoning has to be done in 3 years. You have to have a timeline showing how it's going to be updated. There's a question in the corner there. Eminent domain or something like that, yeah. I think I'm sorry, were you finished? I think the question was general. If I'm wrong, tell me. It was basically, are we going to be incorporating potential new right-of-ways and new accesses that may have to get built as part of this growth policy process? Is that, I mean, can we include it? Oh. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So I guess if I understand this correctly, kind of the question was, there was a few of them, but it was like, can we require when somebody's putting in, can we look at during the growth policy if somebody's putting in a subdivision that they have to require to connect to existing roads, or they have to look at providing access in the future? Yes. I mean, that's done in the transportation plan right now. There's a diagram shown for the Baker Street extension. That's planning anywhere I've been. Is there some cities I've worked for has a rule that if you develop, you have to provide access in 2 different points. So it's absolutely something that we look at. Having to dedicate right-of-way is very typical with subdivisions. There's usually a right-of-way plan. Eminent domain is a whole other story, which I don't want to get into. I don't know if there's anything Craig can tell me that, or Dave, that I missed.
Yeah, I think the only change in the eminent domain rules with the new legislation pertains to eminent domain for active use trails, for shared use trails, for bike and pedestrian paths. We still, as a city, I believe, have eminent domain capabilities for roadways. I can tell you that if you look at the transportation plan, we do show a proposed route for Baker Avenue all the way from 19th Street to JP Road. We do show a route for connecting Whitefish Avenue to Shiloh and then all the way up to Columbia. We don't own that property. We don't have right-of-way. As subdivisions come in and as property is developed, we do require those right-of-ways to be developed or dedicated, and we do require the roadways to be built. But Traditionally, the city of Whitefish is not capitalized on eminent domain, and I don't see that necessarily happening too much in the future.
This is Montana. I've been doing this 21 years, and I've never personally worked on a project that I've seen eminent domain used. It's very hands off. I'm going to take I'm going to be honest. I'm getting tired. This is tough. I'm going to take a couple more questions, and if it's really pressing, otherwise, yeah. So I'm going to take a couple more questions, and I really want to kind of cut it off. You can call me. You can ask on the site. Obviously, I'm not going to ignore the planning board member here. So Toby, go ahead. The question was, is there a way to keep track of where the actual comments are so you can't, like an employer can't get all their employees to ask the same question to try to stack the deck? That's a good question. I don't know. Obviously, we can look and see if the same username and login is asking the same questions. We do have some technology on the site that will tell us, that gives us like geographic locations. But you're talking about actually going down to like IP addresses, and I don't know. I could ask the question. I mean, we have, part of the Engage Whitefish site is that we have technical support, and they answer those kinds of questions. So maybe, I'm sure we're not the first person that's been asked that question, but I can't answer that tonight. I can find out. It's certainly, I care too. Yeah. There was one right in the middle. I'll do you, and then I'll do the one behind, and then everybody. I'm really getting tired. Okay, so back, pink, blue coat, pink shirt. There you are. Stand up. That's you. Stand it up right there. So the question was, do you know really who was behind the drafting of this bill? You can. I know a couple of the senators. There's been a whole lot of different legislation from a lot of different people dropped on us in multiple different ways. There's a few names that rise more than others. One of them is the Senator Hertz. One of them is the Forrest Mandeville. You can go to, I know Angela would probably give me a better, you can go to the state law website, I don't know what it's called, and look and see who the sponsors of these bills are. Forrest Mandeville was one of the sponsors of the bill. So, I haven't, but we, Kelly Lynch, who is the attorney and planner with the Montana League of Cities, has been extremely involved in this process. My understanding was that this legislation started out a whole lot worse, and Montana League of Cities got involved as much as they could. Try to be careful here in case they're watching, to do the least worst version of this as possible. So we have a lot of gratitude towards the Montana League of Cities for really getting involved. Forrest Mandeville is a planner. He has a planning firm, I think, in Billings or something. So he has some knowledge of the planning. What is the genesis? What is the impetus? What is the agenda? Above my pay grade. I'm just the planner trying to figure out how to implement it. I am not touching that one. There was one more in front of you. Yeah, you that had your hand up. That is a hot topic item. Some would say that's one of the biggest issues in Whitefish. It has been a topic of a huge amount of discussion. I don't know if Dave can answer this any better than I can. Sure, we'll look at it. Right, we were one of the first cities in Montana, if not the first city in Montana, maybe one of the first in the States, 1980s, that actually had zoning that allowed and didn't allow short-term rentals, way before Airbnb. Will it be further limited? That is not my decision. That's political. Oh, it'll be part. So what I mean, if you were going to talk to me over coffee, I would tell you short-term rentals is one of the biggest effects on the housing market in America today, good or bad, right? That's my opinion. So others may not have that opinion. Yes, regardless of what your opinion is, that will absolutely be a discussion point during the housing, whether there could be or should be any more restrictions. I'm tired. I want to go to bed. I don't want you to think you're not important, but I'm tired. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. If you didn't. So there, I'm going to be working more on it, but if you have additional questions, you can go on the website and ask the questions. You can post them on the website. I can answer them. There's email address on there. There's a survey. Take it. You'll see more and more things open. I'll start opening up eventually forum boards where everybody can have discussions. So, if you have more questions, plus there's going to be that virtual question and answer September 6th where we can continue this kind of dialogue virtually. You can call in. Link is on the website.